You're listening to Sudbury News Talk.
I want to show you something.
Stand by. On the morning shift.
Anything
could happen.
Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift. I'm AJ Walsh. Glad to be here with you. Thankful you're with us. We've got a great show planned for you today. It's a different show. As you know, we talked yesterday at length about the headline that the Emergencies Act with the federal court ruled the invocation against Canada's Freedom Convoy was unreasonable and unjustified. The quote from the judge said, "I have concluded that the decision to issue the proclamation does not bear the hallmarks of reasonableness," the judge said. So we're going to be following up on that with a special program today. And so we have basically we're going to dedicate the show to that. So stay tuned. It's going to be a great one. Thanks for being with us on CKLU 96.7 FM, cklu.ca. Make sure to like, share, subscribe on our social medias. It's the, Sudbury News on all social medias, but mainly facebook.com/Sudbury News, youtube.com/Sudbury News, where you can share your views on the news. And I'll do my best to get the comments read for those listening and watching, and or listening mainly, and up on the screen for those watching. We're going to dive right in this morning. We got a great show planned for you. It's time is of the essence. So let's just dive right in. News, weather, sports, right here on Sudbury News Talk. We'll be back right after this with the weather. Stay tuned. And Sudbury Weather is brought to you by sudburyweather.ca. Currently it is -3 degrees. So it's a lot milder than it's been in a long time. It feels like -5. However, today we can expect, and this is the important thing, cloudy, 30% chance of drizzle this afternoon. So there's a risk of freezing drizzle this morning. So anyone who's traveling this morning, know that there's a risk of freezing drizzle. Drive accordingly. The high will be +1 today. Wind chill will be -8 this morning. Tonight, cloudy, risk of freezing drizzle again, and low of -3, wind chill near -7. And tomorrow, cloudy, high of +1 again, wind chill -8 in the morning, and it doesn't say what it will be in the afternoon. So here you got tomorrow, cloudy, +1, Saturday, cloudy, +2, Sunday, a mix of sun and cloud, and -4, Monday, cloudy, -7, cloudy and -3 on Tuesday, and then +1 again on Wednesday, January the 31st. Wednesday, January the 31st, it's +1 degree. So look at your satellite here with all of the clouds, and that's why basically all the forecast talking about the next 6 days or so is all clouds, because that's all there is clouds over Northern Ontario. And that is your Sudbury Weather, brought to you by sudburyweather.ca. We'll be back with more right after this. Okay, we have a few people joining us so far. We're early, a little bit early today. We have to end a little bit earlier these days to allow the host to get to work. And so we appreciate you being on. Judy, first to the party, Facebook party, much appreciated. Monique, good morning with a smiley emoji. And good morning from Barry. That's Marianne, liked and shared as usual. And Vin, thanks for being with us so early this morning, Vin. Much appreciated. We got a great group of people on so far. The Sudbury Wolves are in action tonight. You can catch that game right here on CKLU 96.7 FM. Or cklu.ca. We'll have the play-by-play for you they're in North Bay, and it's going to be they're neck and neck in the division, so it's an important game. Then they're back here tomorrow night in Sudbury, going to face off at the Sudbury Arena. Get your tickets at greatersudbury.ca/tickets or sudburywolves.com, or get them. I don't know, if you go to the game to get tickets these days on a Friday night, it's really hard to get tickets. So you want to make sure to get them ahead of time. The Five are in action tomorrow night in Windsor. Then they're back here on Sunday. So get your tickets the same way for the Sudbury Five, and don't miss out on the great action and a great time out. Family friendly. Make sure to get out, support your teams, have a great time with your family at the same time. And today's going to be a special show, like I was saying. We're going to be talking about the federal court decision that the Emergencies Act was unconstitutional, and we'll have more on that coming up in a bit. Good morning from Collingwood. Thanks for joining us, Liette and Denise. Blessings from Espanola, as usual. Thank you, Denise. Jerome, glorious day to be on the right side of the grass. Oh, yes. Yeah, the top side, at least. And Steve, thanks for joining us. Wasaga Beach, awesome. Much appreciated. Thanks for joining us. Great area in Ontario. And Brian, good morning, Sudbury campers. Thanks for joining us. So yeah, like I said, this morning is a bit of it's a deep dive, full-on deep dive show rather than just, going through the local news headlines like we usually do. But we're just going to walk right into the whole, what happened in the last 4 years, and now the courts have thought what most of us have thought, like this is a little bit over the top. So first off, a little bit from Alberta News and Views, and his take on what Jagmeet Singh's response was to this whole thing. And we'll be back with a special with Tucker Carlson talking about this issue with, I can see no better person talking about this than that. So when I saw his video came out on this, I said, everyone needs to see it if you haven't had a chance. So we're going to be checking in with Tucker today on the truckers. Tucker talking about the truckers. Okay, we'll be back right after this.
There is only one person in Canada within the political sphere that is worse than Justin Trudeau. That person is Jagmeet Singh. Jagmeet Singh is the federal leader of the NDP party, and he supports absolutely everything that he complains about. The only reason the Emergencies Act was implemented was because of the signing and support of Jagmeet Singh, and now he is backpedaling, distancing himself from Justin Trudeau, just like everybody is today. We are seeing an absolute firestorm going on right now because of this ruling by the federal court. Unbelievable. Jagmeet claiming he supported implementing the Emergencies Act reluctantly and based on a commission that was not independent or neutral. Y'all, check this out.
From the beginning, we said, and we maintain that the reason we were in that crisis was a direct failure of Justin Trudeau's leadership and also other levels of government that failed to act, to take the challenge presented seriously. Their inaction resulted in a serious crisis where we reluctantly supported the invocation of the emergencies measures. We said that was something that we reluctantly supported. And then we also were very open to the Rouleau Commission and the work and the accountability measures to assess whether it was the right decision and what needs to be done differently in the future. The ruling has been passed down. I understand there will be an appeal of that ruling, and we will follow closely to see the outcome of that appeal.
After today, the Liberal NDP party is going to be absolutely decimated in the polls. The information and the political points and everybody saying, I told you so today is just unbelievable. Here is Jagmeet again today. Everyone should be able to find a place they can afford. But for the students beside me, this has become out of reach. Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre want to use public land to help rich developers get richer. I'm fighting to ensure you have an affordable place to call home. All he has to do is stop his coalition agreement with Justin Trudeau, and that would be it. He would be gone. And then he can stop complaining about all of these bad things that are going on in Canada. This guy is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Here's what Pierre Poilievre has to say. Breaking. Judge rules Trudeau broke the highest law in the land with the Emergencies Act. He caused the crisis by dividing people. Then he violated charter rights to illegally suppress citizens. As Prime Minister, I will unite our country for freedom. Sign here to fire Trudeau and unite for freedom. All politicians' words are hollow to me because we have extreme injustices that are still linked to the dark days of the past 4 years going on in Canada and Alberta right now. But let's be honest here. We have a lot of questions, and they are acting like they just want all of this to disappear, and they are taking the high road and moving on. This is just virtue signaling. We at the bottom want justice, because this is just the beginning. They want us to forget, and we will not forget. Unbelievable. And that's not even getting into our justice system.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Alberta News and Views. And no, I did not take our name from them. It just happened to be. One day I looked and I said, oh, they're doing the kind of same thing, only on Alberta, about Alberta, not Sudbury, right? We're doing it from a city, they're doing it from a province. But anyways, it is what it is. The things that happen in Canada do affect us in Sudbury. We do talk about Sudbury. Now, did this whole thing affect you at all? Did you get into arguments at your kitchen table? Did you get in arguments with some people that you considered friends over all this? Was it divisive in your circle? Is it still to some extent if you say something to do with what happened back then? Tucker Carlson really looks into this. As an American looking outside, he has a different point of view. Like Canada was able to do for many, many years, looking at the United States and able to have an unbiased perspective on what's going on down there and in the rest of the world. Canada was usually in a good position to kind of see what was going on all over the world when we used to have journalists who actually gave us both sides, and we can, determine what the truth was for ourselves. But that's kind of changed in recent times. Tucker Carlson also talks about that as well as he interviews one of the people that was through this movement the whole way, well, at least documenting it for us. And he interviews him. He also gives his take on what he felt was going on this whole time. And without further ado, Tucker Carlson is here for you.
Justin Trudeau is such a metrosexual buffoon, always dressing up in little costumes, that it's almost impossible, or it was almost impossible, to think of him as an authoritarian dictator. You can't take him seriously enough to be afraid of him. But then you probably don't live in Canada. But all of that began to change 2 winters ago. This was the height of the COVID lockdowns, and Canada had some of the most restrictive COVID regulations in the world. Among them was a vax mandate. The people who told you it was your body, your choice didn't believe that at all. All of a sudden, they told you, you must take the shot or you can't participate in life. You can't go anywhere. You can't work. Well, there is at least one group of Canadians with testosterone levels sufficient to question an order like that, and they turned out to be long-haul truckers. And they descended on Canadian cities in January of 2022 to make their voices heard, as they say on the news, to make their voices heard. But they were not greeted in the way that other groups who want to make their voices heard are greeted, as heroes. No. They were greeted with derision in the Canadian media, which effectively is an arm of the Trudeau administration, and by our media, which is effectively an arm of the Democratic Party. Almost nobody took their side. But what's interesting is how reasonable their demands were. Listen to us. Hey, Canada, maybe forcing people to take an untested medicine is not a good idea. They didn't threaten violence. They weren't violent. They were the core of the Canadian middle class, which is almost extinct at this point. But what was so telling, and should really have been foreshadowing of what came later, was Justin Trudeau's reaction to the Canadian truckers, to the trucker convoy. He refused to speak to them. Here he's explaining why.
Is there a reason that you can give as for why you will not discuss or have any negotiations with this particular group?
I have attended protests and rallies in the past when I agreed with the goals, when I supported the people expressing their concerns and their issues. Black Lives Matter is an excellent example of that. But I have also chosen to not go anywhere near protests that have expressed hateful rhetoric, violence towards fellow citizens, and a disrespect not just of science, but of the frontline health workers and, quite frankly, the 90% of truckers who have been doing the right thing to keep Canadians safe, to put food on our tables. Canadians know where I stand. This is a moment for responsible leaders to think carefully about where they stand and who they stand with.
So people who are paying close attention learned a lot from that clip. First, here is a guy, Justin Trudeau, who will say literally anything. He will say the opposite of what is true with a smile on his face. His heart rate won't rise a bit. He's a sociopath. Here is also a person who has no regard, in fact, contempt for democracy. This is the elected leader of a so-called democracy who refuses to even listen to criticism of his policies. So, in fact, he's not a democratic leader. He's an authoritarian. And that became very clear shortly after that was shot. At least 4 Canadian truckers went to jail. Now, what did they go to jail for? What did they do exactly? Well, to this day, no one can really say, and they're still in jail. Watch the Canadian media's description of that specific case. And as you listen to what we're about to show you, ask yourself, did they tell me anything real, or was every single word a lie spoken at the behest of the ruling party of Canada? This is State Media Exhibit A. Watch this.
According to newly unsealed court documents, RCMP believe 4 men accused of plotting to kill Mounties at the Coutts border blockade were being given orders by an outside leadership group. The names of the people in that group have been redacted from the report as they are part of an active investigation. The newly released records involve transcriptions of phone calls between the 4 charged with conspiracy to commit murder: Anthony Olenek, Chris Lysak, Jerry Morin, and Chris Carter, and the unidentified leadership group. The documents state the leadership wanted more than just vaccine mandates lifted, but also the elimination of the professional political class. It also alleges Olenek, Lysak, Morin, and Carbert trained for months and stockpiled firearms at Olenek's property near Claire's home while taking orders from an unidentified group. The documents reveal in February, Mounties seized more than 36,000 rounds of ammunition, 2 pipe bombs, gas masks, camouflage, and tactical gear from the property. Other intercepted calls from the 4 men's cell phones refer to more potential weapons coming from a second stockpile in Nanton, as well as a growing tension between those protesting in Coutts and the leadership group. In February, Olenek, Lysak, Morin, Carbert, and 9 others were arrested after RCMP uncovered a cache of weapons in Coutts. Olenek is also charged with making and possessing an explosive device, and Lysak faces a charge of uttering threats.
So parse what you just heard carefully. Again, that's State Media in Canada. So here are 4 guys, working class guys, live in rural areas, and they've got a firearm stockpile. Right. They probably don't have a lot more between the 4 of them than your average farmer does in the state of Nebraska or the state of Maine or the state of Oregon or anywhere else far from a big city. They're hunters, and so they have guns. Now, the pipe bomb is a very specific question. What's a pipe bomb? We don't know, and neither does the media organization reporting it. But critically, they don't tell you anything about this outside group that's supposedly coordinating them. The point of that news report was not to inform you, but to scare the crap out of you and make those 4 people who are now in jail seem like scary threats to Canada. Mission accomplished. So what you have in a country like Canada, where you have an authoritarian government that's taken away civil liberties, a dying middle class, and no media, is you have almost nobody pushing back against the lies. There is maybe 1 news organization left in Canada that asks very simple questions of the people who run the country. Why are you doing this? Can you answer the question? That's Rebel News. Watch one of their reporters try to ask Krista Freeland, who's the finance minister of Canada, spent many years in Washington, D.C., known to many people who lived in D.C. as a kind of low IQ functionary. She now has power, and she does not want to answer any questions from the 1 independent media organization remaining in Canada. Watch what happens when a reporter tries to get her to answer the question.
Ms. Freeland, how come the IRGC is not a terrorist group? Why is your government supporting Islamo-Nationalism? What? Excuse me. What are you doing?
You're under arrest for assault. Why are you pushing me? You're under arrest for assault. You're under arrest for assault. Police.
Police, you're under arrest. How am I under arrest? You bumped into me. You pushed into me. You bumped. I was just scrubbing. I got my credentials here, and you just bumped into me.
Can I have the microphone? Can I have the microphone? Can I have the microphone? Can you give?
I'm not officer. Take your hand out. Why am I under arrest? I'm just doing my job. This is your Canada now, folks. You know, this is the Gestapo taking blackface's orders.
So Canada has descended to an extremely dark place, and there are a lot of threads to the story. We're going to Canada very soon to see it for ourselves. But before we go, we thought we would speak to Gord McGill, who knows a lot about this. He is a Canadian and a trucker. He was not, strictly speaking, part of the Freedom Convoy 2 winters ago, but he was there, and for a lot of Americans, he was the main way that we knew what was happening because he recorded it and put it out on social media. He joins us now. Gord McGill, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Carlson. Pleasure to meet you.
It's great to meet you. So it's funny that Canada, second largest country in the world, bigger than the United States, deeper natural resources than the United States, our biggest trading partner. Canada's a big deal to the U.S. in a lot of ways.
We've been good neighbors for the most part.
I would say, haven't tried to invade or anything like that.
Although I think we need an invasion north, but
I think we can get that done. But the average American knows nothing about what's going on in Canada, and our understanding of Canada is ruled by cliches that developed 40 years ago. We think of it as a passive, ultra-nice country where, you know, that no one gets arrested.
I would submit to you that the Canadian media returns that in kind because they've been operating on cliches about Americans since forever.
I think that's right, and there's a lot going on there. But it's a little bit shocking, I think, to most Americans to see how authoritarian Canada has become. Truly a place where you can't ask a question, you'll be arrested for assault. Are you shocked?
That particular incident with Mr. Menzies, I mean, I want to say it's shocking, but at this point, you know, the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa was crushed in much the same way. RCMP smashing the windows of trucks, beating up peaceful protesters. I'm not really surprised that they did this to Mr. Menzies.
It's horrifying, but again, you wouldn't be surprised since you've been following it for more than 2 years now. So tell us, let's go right to that clip that we played from state media in Canada about the 4 incredibly dangerous people who are still languishing in prison.
Right, yes.
Tell us who they are.
So colloquially known as the Coots Four, Jerry Morin, Chris Lysak, Chris Carbert, and Tony Olyanek are a group of protesters who were at the Coots Freedom Convoy site.
Where is Coots?
It's on the border with Alberta and Montana, sort of where Interstate 15 ends, and then take the highway north to Calgary and other points. And they were there exercising their rights to object to government policies, and due to very powerful forces, they've been caught up in railroaded really by the government and sort of used as pawns, because after the Freedom Convoy was crushed by Trudeau and the government, there was an inquest into that called the Public Order Emergency Commission, which the Justice Rouleau, in his conclusion about the question of whether or not Justin Trudeau was justified in imposing the Emergencies Act, he was I can't remember the exact word, but he was a little bit reluctant. He was sort of like reluctantly agreed that Trudeau was within his rights. And most of that hinges on this case in Coots, which once you investigate it, isn't much of a case at all. And so these 4 regular working class dudes who are at the protest site have now been imprisoned for almost 2 years. They were denied bail. They're kept in what's called remand, because they haven't been convicted of anything. They haven't faced trial yet, so they don't get the rights afforded convicted prisoners. And so they've, you know, been subject to long stints of
solitary confinement.
Solitary confinement and denial of certain medical care. There's been some drama around that. Tony Olyanek has got problems with his guts. He was denied medication that he needed. Chris Lysak is a big, huge bear of a man. He's 6'5", has size 15 feet. They still haven't given him the proper shoes to wear while he's in jail. He's like walking around in Crocs all the time. He also has problems because he's so big. He needs an extra mattress. They've treated these guys like crap.
And what I'll just say, there's no media in the world I have more contempt for than the Canadian media. They literally work for the government. They are state media.
Yeah, they're financed to the hilt. In 2019, the Trudeau regime gave them $595 million to bail them out because they're losing money, in part because a lot of people know they're liars and aren't interested in what they have to sell. And there's been top-ups to that, and I think, I was looking it up, there's somewhere north of $700 million in subsidies from Justin Trudeau.
Right. So he owns the media. He uses your tax dollars to pay for flattering coverage of himself.
Right, and that's not even counting the CBC. That's a whole another $1.7 billion.
And to eliminate all coverage of his misdeeds. But I just want to get to something that we played in that clip. They were accused of taking orders from a secretive outside group, and Canadian media wouldn't tell us because it was, quote, redacted, what this group is. Has anyone ever explained who these guys were supposedly working for?
There's been some...
The Russians, I assume?
Yeah, there was one CBC reporter who accused the Freedom Convoy of taking money from Putin. Of course, that was ridiculous. One of the items there they were talking about, it was actually a Telegram group that's run by one guy who's just a random dude that espouses his opinion, and the government is claiming this one random guy with the Telegram group to be some criminal mastermind. Interestingly enough, that guy hasn't been apprehended, arrested, or charged with anything. And the media have also tried to conflate the Coots guys with a podcaster in Canada named Jeremy Mackenzie and his meme country he created in his mind called Diagolon. And there's a social justice activist group in Canada called the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, who are also paid by Trudeau. And they claim that Diagolon are like an ethno-nationalist threat, and they're going to, they're armed to the hilt and they're going to take over the government. And investigations showed that Diagolon doesn't exist. And Jeremy Mackenzie is just a guy sitting in his house in Nova Scotia with some fans. And they tried to turn this into a thing. There was documents released showing that what the Canadian Anti-Hate Network had said was totally false, and the media hasn't discussed that at all.
So you've got at least four, I think many more, but you've got these four political prisoners rotting in prison, no bail, no trial, for 2 years. Has
Correct.
The Canadian media said anything about this other than to accuse them of being controlled by Putin?
So at the beginning, the media repeated these allegations from the RCMP and the Crown. The defense sought a publication ban because it was apparent immediately that the media was trying to railroad these guys. So the media, what they've done now is they're hiding behind that publication ban, but the publication ban is very specific on information to obtain and these unproven allegations by the RCMP and the Crown. You can still ask questions about the case, right? Like, why have these guys been denied bail? What are the connections, the political connections to the invocation of the Emergency Act and the resulting Public Order Emergency Commission ruling? There's all kinds of questions you can still ask about this case that are not subject to the bans, and there's been nothing.
So, do Canadians understand what's happening? Do they care, do you think?
A small number of us do, but we are not the people represented in the media.
How do Canadians get, your media blockade is North Korean. It's hard to get information in Canada. How do people get news about what's actually happening?
Well, they have to read, I've written on this case in Newsweek. They have to go to American media or other parts of the world because, there are some people in Canada trying, like, I'm Canadian, I write on Substack. There's a couple other, people who've been podcasting about.
I should say you're living in exile.
Yeah, I live in upstate New York now. That's correct. Yeah, I escaped the Gulag.
Yep.
But yeah, so if people back home want to find out about this, there's only a small number of people discussing it, and most of them aren't in the country.
I assume that Trudeau, like all authoritarians, like Joe Biden, is making an example of the Coots 4 to discourage future protests. That's what Biden did with January 6th. Arrest all these people. People are afraid. We haven't had mass protests about anything since January 6th because people know that the FBI will put them in prison. Do you think that's why he did that?
I think that's why he did that. And then over and above the Coots 4 guys, there's a number of other people who are continuing to be punished. Chris Barber and Tamara Leach, who are the sort of the faces of the Ottawa convoy, they were charged with like mischief and intimidation and counseling mischief and all these like silly, ridiculous charges. And their court cases are still ongoing. A number of people who were involved in Ottawa, like just showing up and protesting and taking part in it, making their voices heard, as you said, were also charged with mischief and various other offenses. Some of those people, they had their cases dropped or they were acquitted because there was nothing to it. And now the Crown is appealing those acquittals, and they're trying to drag regular people who've already been through their court case and had it acquitted, and they're bringing them back and charging them again. He's vindictive, man. Like he can't not be wrong. He can't not admit that the largest peaceful protest in Canadian history was just that. It has to be something else to like satisfy his like sort of a proclivities towards totalitarianism.
Yeah, well, not even proclivities, just the totalitarianism he's imposing on the country. Have there been mass protests since the trucker convoy?
Not that I'm aware of.
See?
Yeah.
So it works.
It does, unfortunately. And the media, as you say, have a role to play in this because they are basically not discussing the fact that we have a situation almost akin to Guantanamo Bay with 4 of our own citizens. Something many Americans might not know about. There was a young kid named Omar Khadr, who was born in Canada, but I think his father was from Egypt or somewhere else. And Khadr Sr. was a supporter of the Taliban. And after September 11th, Khadr Sr. and his boy went to Afghanistan. Omar Khadr was involved in a firefight with American troops. A medic was killed. Khadr was picked up, taken to, I can't remember if it was Kabul or Kandahar, and then sent to Guantanamo Bay, but the only person at Guantanamo with a Canadian passport. Regardless of that case, or what anybody thinks about Omar Khadr, the Canadian media did not shut up about that guy for the entire time. It was front page news, front and center. Omar Khadr's being done dirty by being in Guantanamo Bay. We have to get him out. Prime Minister at the time, Stephen Harper, was heavily criticized for not doing enough to have Omar Khadr extracted from Guantanamo Bay. Eventually he came back to Canada, and then Omar Khadr and his lawyers sued the government, and under the Trudeau administration was cut a check for $10.5 million.
As payment for shooting an American medic, or?
For being allowed to be in Guantanamo Bay for as long as he was. But the point is that the media did everything in their power to make sure that Omar Khadr was a household name, and they haven't lifted a finger for the Coots 4.
So Canada, from afar, haven't been there in a while, but it does seem like it's collapsing. I mean, it's
not a good time. Most expensive real estate prices in the world, inflation out of control. People are finding it really difficult to afford to live. It's almost impossible to buy a home in many of the major cities. My sister went to go and see Pierre Poilievre, who's now the leader of the Conservative Party, and he was doing, before he was elected to be leader of the Conservative Party, he was doing like the meet and greets and talking with people all across the country. And my sister told me when she went to go meet him that the number one issue on everybody's lips, past COVID, past anything else, was real estate prices and the housing shortage. Like, where are our children going to live? How are they going to afford it? What are you going to do about this?
Well, one of the reasons your housing prices are so high is because there's massive foreign investment from China into your real estate markets.
That's one of them, yep.
Yep, it is, especially in Western Canada and Vancouver. So the Prime Minister could end that tomorrow. The government of Canada could end that tomorrow. Just only Canadian citizens can buy residential real estate in Canada. Why not do that?
Well, it's been recently revealed that the Chinese Communist Party has been involved in federal politics in Canada since at least Brian Mulroney. And in the last 2 elections, like, CSIS has produced evidence that the Chinese Communist Party directly assisted the election of 19 or 20 different members of parliament. So, I don't foresee Mr. Trudeau doing too much to upset his masters.
Okay, well, maybe the other thing that the Canadian government could do, if you don't want to rein in China because they're really in control, you could at least maybe slow down immigration a little bit. I think Canada has the highest immigration rate per capita of any country in the world. You're basically importing.
It's very high.
Entire
and,
subcontinent.
You know, I want to there's no material way to support these people, right? Like our healthcare, our nationally funded healthcare system has got major problems.
When you say major problems, what do you mean?
Like unable to deliver care to the people who already live here, right?
Yep.
We don't have the housing. We don't have the economy can't support it. There's not enough jobs for everybody. And we're just being told that, you know, 1 million immigrants a year is just fine, even though there is no material way to support or integrate any of these extra people. And it's just making all of these problems worse.
Has there been a national referendum on this? Do most Canadians support this? Hey, let's move Bangladesh to Canada. Are people for that?
I would submit to you most people would not support that. But again, no one's doing the polling and the government doesn't care.
So if the government doesn't care, and if it's literally changing the nature of the country forever right in front of your eyes, and your opinion is irrelevant, how is it a democracy?
I would submit to you that it's not much of a democracy, and Trudeau rules because he's got a deal with the leader of the New Democratic Party, Jagmeet Singh, and, you know, obviously he's doing very poorly. Polling indicates that in the next election, it's quite likely that the Conservative Party is going to win. But I don't know if that's going to change anything, right?
Right. The Conservatives in Canada seem very feminized to me and kind of self-hating and sad and afraid.
You know who Michael Malice is?
Yes.
He has a great saying, conservatism is progressivism driving the speed limit. And that applies with the Conservative Party of Canada.
But what is it? I mean, that is one thing about Canada that's remained consistent, and I think Canada will be a completely different country in 10 years because of immigration, so we'll reassess then. But people who are born in Canada have a reputation of being apologetic, not wanting to rock the boat, a little bit self-hating, meek.
I don't know about self-hating, but they're definitely navel-gazers.
What is that?
That's a long-running psyop. You know, if you grow up in Canada, you have Canadian content rules on the CBC and in the rest of the media, and we're always taught to like think of ourselves as not being Americans, and it's always Canada, Canada, Canada all the time, rather than like looking outwards and being adult about things. There's something in the zeitgeist there that, like, you know, makes us extremely self-referential and almost insular in a way while pretending to not be.
Yes, and it strips Canadians of their ability, with the exception of these truckers, I guess, their ability to say, wait a second, you can't do this to my country. Like, there's not a lot of that in Canada. They seem passive.
Unfortunately, some people in Canada are passive, and then when you get people who do rise up and say, hey, enough's enough, well, this is what you get now. The media smears you, lies about you. The government crushes your protest, and there you have it. Like,
But if you have a cross-dressing fascist like Justin Trudeau take over, and one of his first orders of business is to take your guns away, I don't think you need to be a genius to ask, like, why would he want to do that? Canada doesn't. I mean, there's no evidence that farmers in Saskatchewan are going on murder sprees. Okay, why would he be so intent on taking their guns away, their means of self-defense? Did that raise any alarms for anyone in Canada that maybe this guy doesn't have the best intentions?
It's raised a number of alarms with people who are not represented in the media and not represented in the government. Like, people do know about this and people are concerned. But again, you have to go outside the country to hear about it, or you have to go into, you know, alternative media.
I should say, just to be totally clear and sincere, I'm one of the few Americans who actually loves Canada because I think it's so beautiful.
I love my country too. It is very beautiful.
Yeah, it's the most beautiful, I think.
It's full of really good people who are not being served by their government.
But the government killing thousands of Canadians a year through assisted suicide, which they encourage, not for immigrants, only for native-born, like that seems a pretty ominous sign. Like, if the government is killing its own citizens, maybe they don't mean you well. I'm just trying to connect dots here.
Yeah, well, given the sort of collapsing healthcare system, this medical assistance in dying program, and their seeming lack of concern about making any of these material conditions better by just throwing more people at the problem would belie that. No, in fact, they do not care about us at all.
But does anybody, I mean, in other words, if I say I love you and then I say what I really think you should do is kill yourself and I'll help you, maybe I'm lying. Maybe I don't love you. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there.
Course, yeah.
Has anyone in Canada said that? Are you allowed to say that out loud?
I'm not 100% sure on that one, but it seems like there's less and less things we are allowed to say, if not in the letter of the law, but in what the media will allow in the discourse.
Yes. Wow, that's pretty distressing. Do you think you'll be able to return to Canada, and do you want to?
I mean, I've got lots of family there. I have 2 daughters who had, maybe one day when they grow up, they'd like to move back to Canada and, check the place out, maybe settle there. I don't know, but it doesn't look really good. And when the Emergencies Act was declared, I was thinking about going back to Ottawa a second time, and I actually sought legal counsel about whether or not I would get picked up at the border because of what I was saying in Newsweek, under the emergency.
What were you saying? Were you calling for insurrection against Justin Trudeau?
No, I was just simply telling the truth about what the protesters wanted and what was actually going on in the streets in Ottawa.
Do you think it's weird that we have this State Department that's totally, obviously doesn't like America, but is focused supposedly on freedoms in other countries, and we're sending $500 billion to Ukraine to liberate Ukraine, but we have these grotesque human rights violations right across our border, and no one says anything about it from the State Department? Does that seem weird?
It does, and something that was revealed in these documents related to this Jeremy McKenzie fellow is that members of the Five Eyes security arrangement were basically brought into this sort of wild goose chase after this guy, and so your own security services resources were wasted chasing a Canadian podcaster.
And the other English-speaking, the Five Eyes refers to English-speaking intelligence services. Right. Canada, New Zealand, Australia, United States. They were assisting with this?
They were involved with it. Yeah, it was revealed in those documents that at least New Zealand and the United States were both involved in this investigation.
I'm not surprised at all. I mean, these are not separate governments. This is one government. Have you ever met anyone personally who likes Justin Trudeau?
No.
You've never met, even just say hi. You've never met anyone who likes him.
I mean, I'm sure there are people I know and in my life who, think he's all right or maybe even voted for him, but most of my really good friends and associates dislike the man, and I mean dislike is the diplomatic term I will use on TV.
Would they feel comfortable announcing that in Canada, the ones who still live there?
I mean, there are people who will say things about Mr. Trudeau. I mean, it's you are taking a risk, I had the RCMP call me once for sending mean tweets at Prime Minister Trudeau.
What'd they say? The Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Yes, there's an organization, a sub-organization within the RCMP called the Protective Investigations Unit.
Ooh, they sound like fun.
Yeah, they're sort of akin to the Secret Service.
Yeah.
And there's another group within them who monitor online
hate.
Hate. Yeah.
Hate, Gord.
Yeah, I guess they didn't like me making fun of the Prime Minister.
What were you saying?
Nothing. I was just posting memes at him.
Oh, but the memes were dangerous. So
I guess
the feds called you.
As who's this fellow in Florida that was arrested and charged and went to court for making memes?
We interviewed him. Yes, he's facing prison time for that. Yeah, making fun of Hillary Clinton, not allowed. But I do think it's fair to say America's obviously becoming a police state, pretty clear. But Canada's farther along down that path. It's smaller, there's less resistance, there's no media at all. independent. So it's a captive nation. What can Americans do to help our cousins north of the border?
Just understand that most of the Canadian media are corporate welfare cases and that you're never going to get the truth out of them, much like a lot of the media here. And, stay awake to that. If they wanted to, they could help the Coots 4 guys. We have a new Give, Send, Go set up for them, simply called Trudeau's Political Prisoners, because they have the full weight of the state against them. And they've had trouble getting decent and competent legal representation because, being a lawyer or a judge in Canada means in some way you're connected to the Liberal Party, right? Like 76% of judges in Canada are donors to and members of the Liberal Party.
So there you have it. What a great interview Tucker Carlson has there. And I'd just like to welcome Nick, who's joining us here. I just have to turn her mic on right here. And here you go. So you've been listening
Hello.
to that. Hey, Nick, you've been listening to that. So the headline that was out, breaking news 2 days ago now, was Emergencies Act. The federal court rules the invocation against the Freedom Convoy. The Emergencies Act, remember, they're freezing bank accounts and arresting people. It was unreasonable and unjustified. So they're going to appeal this now in our courts. So any thoughts on what we've just been watching?
Well, it's just a circus show. And it's a total circus, and they're just wasting more taxpayers' money. And
exactly.
A lot of
what money are they using to fight this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're fighting Canadian citizens using Canadian citizens' money, and it's just going to go right up to the Supreme Court. And then, you know what I mean?
And then what happens?
Yeah. Is there ever going to be any accountability with this particular regime? I guess you can say it's probably safe to call it that now.
No. Well, I don't think there is anything that happens when you live in a communist country. We think we live in a free country, but we're definitely not in a free country. I'm not allowed to share news articles on my socials. That's just a simple thing. In the States, I saw this post, and this guy said something like 7 people were charged in Russia for sharing information on their socials, but they live in a communist country. And the guy said, do you know how many people got arrested in the States in 2023 for sharing information? And the guy's like, no, 4,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be interesting to see in Canada what those numbers are. One person actually ended up going to got arrested and on probation because she shared lyrics that had the N-word, but it was her son. It was his favorite song, and she shared the lyrics. So it's just we've gone mad.
Well, maybe Justin Trudeau just wants to keep Canadians out of jail. So if he makes it impossible to share news, you won't get arrested for sharing the wrong news.
Oh, that's
right?
really nice.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
You just can't share it. So then it keeps you out of jail. I think it's really nice of him to do that.
But it's insane that these people are in jail and they haven't gotten bail. But do you know how many people are dealing drugs on the streets and they get bail right away? Or
exactly.
All these like real criminals. These are not real criminals. We are allowed to protest. We are allowed to protest.
Well, Justin Trudeau said that he would have protested with them if he agreed with them.
Well, it doesn't matter what you agree and what you don't agree. This is a free country, I thought.
Hey, people should, he'll go to any protest if he agrees with it.
But he agreed with Black Lives Matter.
Yeah,
which
of course.
I do agree that Black Lives Matter, but I don't agree with violence that was happening in all the protests.
No, there was a lot of violence. I remember news reports where they're standing in front of a burning building going, oh, these mostly peaceful protests. It's like, what? Very Orwellian.
But like
world.
This is Aaron, like this is where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
They felt okay with sharing where there's a car on fire in the background. They're like, oh, it's mostly peaceful.
Whereas
this is how stupid.
Whereas they're showing
people are.
Yeah, then they're showing a peaceful protest like there was in Ottawa saying it was violent. And they show some P on the side like of a statue, and that's violent.
Right.
Or I don't know what else they could have shown. That oh yeah, the staged swastika and Confederate flags. That's right, for sure. Now we know they're staged because that's been shown that they were just photo ops used. And then that's what they used. Oh, we cannot tolerate swastikas, you know.
But it's just interesting that as Canadians, we know the two events, the two things or the three things that have happened that they just blew up. And we're just like, really? We know a lot of people that were there. There was bouncy castles. Everybody felt super safe. It was an environment where they felt so loved and appreciated and accepted. And they're just like, we're uniting. And it's just really sad what's happening. And it's going to get worse.
Yeah. And divisive as well. People were divided. Like social media, like
you couldn't even talk about it.
Arguments. It's like, oh, you're one of those, or you're like each side would say you're one of those, you're one of those. And it's just terrible. We shouldn't be divided. If anything, we should be able to have the conversation. But the media was complicit in the division. The politics of our country was complicit in the division of this country, and continue to be so.
He was calling people racist
and misogynist. Yeah,
and misogynist.
In
if
French,
you agreed
in French, he gave that interview in French, so that way, he could say, "I didn't say that," because you're saying. You said we're misogynist. No, actually he didn't. He said misogyne or something. I don't know what it is in French. He didn't say misogynist because he didn't say it in English. So he can actually lie and get away with it and said, I didn't say that. He said it in French.
He also said that the Canadian government didn't force people to get the jab, that nobody was forced.
Which they did. And I have the news conference actually saved to prove that if he ever comes out and says that again.
He's just a liar. Like we're dealing with a narcissist. We are dealing with a narcissist that it's just like even that guy who got arrested for asking that politician a question, we saw it with our own eyes.
Yeah.
But there are people, Aaron, that will watch CNN or CBC and be like, that guy should be arrested. He should be arrested. Like, we live in a circus. Like it's just crazy. Some people are just under a spell.
Yeah, the RCMP officer said that the reporter assaulted him. He assaulted him. That's why he's being arrested.
Assaulted her.
Well, I think he said assaulted him.
Because he bumped into him because he dove in front of him and he's like, we had this
basketball.
all on video.
Yeah, basketball, the pick and roll. The guy gets in front or whatever. And it was a foul, but on the side of the police officer, not on the side of the journalist, right? So crazy.
It's just crazy. We are like the whole boiling frog scenario where if you keep bringing up the heat, the frog doesn't necessarily realize it's being boiled until it's too late. And when it's too late, they die. And this is what they're doing with our rights. That's what they're doing. And we're getting comfortable with this. We're getting more comfortable. They take away our rights. And we're getting more comfortable. And all of a sudden, we're not gonna, it's just, I'll have a digital ID. And it's like, Anik, you only have 400 points. You're not allowed to go buy gas. And I'll be like,
So with this podcast, each word we say that's not supposed to be said, a point comes off, a point comes off, a point comes off with AI, And then you're like, I can't say that word anymore. I can't express myself. I can't do certain things that I used to be able to do. And and then eventually you just don't exist. You don't have a digital ID.
We're going to need a lot of help from this community to go buy our groceries and to grab my car, come to my house, grab my car and put gas in it.
Well, that's the thing. It's harder to
need to work together
to get it back once it's gone. So if we can prevent it from happening in the first place.
Aaron, do you actually think we could prevent it from happening?
I don't know, but I want to be on the side of those that did everything they could to prevent it, at least in history. History looks back and says, you know what? They didn't prevent it, but they did everything in their power to do that. At least they didn't just sit back and allow it to happen.
Yep.
It's
true. And our children,
Yeah.
Our children, like, Mom, what did you do?
Yeah. Because in
what
the end,
were you doing?
That's right. You're going to have a life review at some point in your life. You're going to be held accountable. Sir Justin Trudeau's not held accountable, but we will be held accountable. He actually will be held accountable. He doesn't realize
Yes, he will be.
And he'll have to get an account of every single thing he's done with his power. And so if you're paid off, you want that to be, publicly shown that, Aaron was paid off and he just went along with people that, were out to do harm to other people. Or no,
Right.
Aaron stood up and did everything he could to help, others to
Yeah.
be
When
happy.
exactly when all this was happening, like I lost my husband, I lost friends, I lost customers because just like, Anik, you are losing your mind. Like, this is not happening, Anik. The government isn't against us. Everything is safe and effective. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, just do the math. It doesn't make sense that all of this is available. Like, it just does not make sense. And I'm not really good with math. And I was able to figure that out.
Good point there. Yeah. Intuition was really good during the past 4 years. It's only going to be 2 weeks, we were told, right? It's only going to be 2 weeks. And it ended up being, we're still in it. Like, I still go to my doctors and there's still mandates of different kinds in different circles and stuff. It's not over. And we're still feeling the effects of it. People are still in jail. They're still in jail, as we just heard from Tucker Carlson, right? In Canada. So anyways, that's the show for today. Thanks for sticking around, Nick, and coming on. That's really valiant of you. Really appreciate that. And if you are able to come on a subsequent show, you just let me know. And we will go from there. We want you as much as you're available, and so do our viewers and listeners.
Tomorrow.
Well, let's do that. Tomorrow, Friday, and Nick's going to be on. We'll continue the conversation. We'll even talk about some local things as well. And we'll be back. Go Wolves Go tonight in North Bay. And we'll be back with the how they did on the game. And then tomorrow night, they're going to be back in town as well. So thanks, Nick, for being with us. And we'll be back same time, same place tomorrow, God willing. Stay safe, everyone. And stay tuned now for Earshot Daily on CKLU 96.7 FM. Ciao.
This is Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift.